Thanks everyone for joining. It's nice to see all your faces. I'm really excited about this conversation. And I really respect all your work and your perspective on this conversation. So it's pretty open-ended and there's a lot of us in here. So we can just kind of roll just kind of when you're comfortable sharing and responding. So I'm gonna start like in a more general way. About the PR industry as a whole. Obviously, so much has changed. It feels like every month there's massive shifts. And just in the past, couple of years, especially with the pandemic, like our jobs have changed tremendously. And I think that priorities have also changed, in terms of media outlets, and also, what's important and trying to show clients kind of where your priorities are and understanding their priorities as well at the same time. I feel like, something that used to be a really big opportunity may not be as big now. And also, there's so many new and different types of opportunities that may be like non-traditional. So let's start with Ximena. Like, what would you say these days? How do you prioritize the outlets that you're talking about and looking to with your clients, and how do you evaluate that, and how do you kind of balance with what they're looking for as well?
All right, before I start, I have a funny Paul story. Everybody. Paul and I met because Paul used to work at his newspaper, his college newspaper, and I used to rep an amazing Mexican artist named Chetes, and he was a big fan. I was at EMI back in the day. And Paul actually wrote to me because he really wanted to interview Chetes, and I sent him a CDs back in the day.
Physical CDs.
And that's how we met. And then he ended up working for Tomás many years later, and now he's on his own and everything. So anyway.
That was probably 20 years ago at this point.
No, it wasn't. It was like 4 years ago. What do you mean? 20
right,
years ago?
exactly.
Even born. I was 20 years ago.
Sending CDs to college newspapers. That's exactly funny to think about too.
How do I prioritize? Well, I think times have changed, and I think that I am not of the belief of like, send it to everybody and see what sticks. I think that's horrible. I actually, there's many times where I see stuff where I think it's either too soon for an artist to be in a certain place, or too, it's not the right outlet to tell the story. I think you have to be, just as I am picky about who I work with and what artist I choose to work with, I think you have to be really picky about who you tell your story to and how you tell it, because it's a different angle for everybody. But I think it's that. I think it's quality over quantity. I really am a believer of quality over quantity. I don't think, those old days of like, oh, here's, I've had clients in the past that are like, send me all the links. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm not going to send you all the links, because there's not all the links. If you want all the links, I'm not your person. I want to be able to tell stories, and I want to be able to tell stories in a way that's comprehensive and that makes sense for the artist. And that I tell every artist, it's like, if in 20 years you read this, I still want you to feel proud of this. And I still want you to say like, okay, this is representative of where I was at that moment in my career. So that makes
a lot of sense. Does someone else want to share their thoughts? We can kind of keep it open from there and just let it roll.
I think it's also important, just like Ximena said, that it's also important knowing the goals of your client, and also in terms of budget, because sometimes you need to be, more creative in another way. And I think those are two important things that we should also think about it.
I mean, I'll chime in here. I really think that it depends on the kind of artist and what stage in their career they are. There's some artists who really need like cross-market exposure as much as possible. I mean, it really depends on the marketing strategy where we will align our publicity strategy, right? So some points, there is artists. I mean, sometimes the like Ximena said, sometimes the goal is I mean, the goal for all of us is always quality over quantity. You know what I'm saying? Because unfortunately, in our sector specifically, there is not much quantity. So, you know what I'm saying? We have to be tactful on that, in that sense, and really take advantage of our resources with worthy press and press that's going to be picked up and read many moons later, and really expose the artist to somebody new, somebody from a different generation, whatever the case is, right? But also it really depends on the strategy, because some artists are mass market and they want to be everywhere and with everything, and so it just really depends, because then there's artists that are more niche, that are more sophisticated in the kind of press that their consumer and their listener is picking up and reading or watching. So I really think sometimes it depends, definitely. I wish it was always quality over quantity, but unfortunately, there's different, like I said, there's different sectors. There's artists that are just so hungry and want to do it all, and the label is prioritizing with like going mass market, and then we have to put our thinking guns on and exploit those opportunities. But I just think it depends. But yes, in a perfect world, we would all love.
That's well said. So is anyone here involved in like more the side of DSP pitching, or kind of pitching for opportunities maybe that are not technically media, maybe going for different types of looks that ultimately move the needle for streams? What would you say that role, how does that happen, and do you find yourself doing that type of thing in addition to press?
Well, maybe Chris can take this one, because that's her.
Absolutely.
Damn.
There you go. Perfect. I think you're on mute.
We can hear you, Chris.
Sorry. Yeah, so DSPs is a whole different world, right? They have like a designated person, like labels, even independent labels have a designated person, like a streaming manager, if you will, who is just dedicated to strictly DSPs, right? It just so happens that I started in the world of PR. So I, by nature, I'm a publicist. At the same time, for a couple companies, I actually work strictly just doing DSPs. I'm considered their streaming manager. And PR and streaming doesn't intertwine, because of the fact that you have someone who's dedicated to that solely. People get territorial, like, this is PR and this is like streaming platforms. So it doesn't, unless you're really specifically hired for that reason, it doesn't really intertwine with PR. Now, what I will say is there's certain things that will drive and help create a story to drive streams, or to get editors to be like, oh, look, they're in the cover of like New York Times, right? This is creating like a buzz that's going to drive their viewers, their audience, and their listeners to these platforms to listen to the music, who have maybe never like known the artist before. So it creates a lane to get listeners to go to and listen to them at certain platforms, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And to add to that, on my end, it's really truly not part of a publicist's scope of work per se, but nowadays, because of streaming, really, so many artists that are successful are still remain independent, or remain with a really small team of people so sometimes they kind of hand us that hat. And we just kind of, we work with with management and sometimes the artists by themselves to really put this forth. I also think that the structure in the streaming partners, I mean, when things first got like hot and heavy in the streaming side, it wasn't so structured, right? So like we could reach out and pitch this to the editor or editors. I mean, back then it was like a whole other thing. This thing has morphed into a massive operation, and so where we used to be able to say, hey, under like my scope of work, yeah, I can reach out to the streaming partners. Now it's again a lot more formal. Everything needs to be sent in a formal pitch. Most artists do this in a deck or via preparation like that. So it's different. But sometimes I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I have dudes that are super indie and rely on my relationships, and I know Loren has a few as well that is the same thing. We kind of put that hat on. And to me, it doesn't matter because it also opens up opportunities for special content that the streaming partners are doing for like Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month or Women's History Month, or they do these special capsules, and sometimes or out of home opportunities, and sometimes they the PR teams for that, which is cool because I love to be involved with my mind is so blown by how the music industry has changed due to streaming, and that also in turn has changed our role and our gigs a little bit in our scopes as well.
I tend to get
a lot of journal. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I tend to get involved. I always get involved on the streaming with the partner side, because I think that you can't separate that part from the overall communication strategy of an artist. I also think there's a lot of like campaigns and stuff that you can do. For an example, I had Ivan Cornejo, and we did an amazing campaign with Beats. Like I've been involved in 2 Up Next campaigns with Apple. I've been involved in 2 Radar campaigns with 2 of my artists. So it isn't I think that it goes hand in hand. Obviously, like depends on if they're signed to a label, and the label obviously has a digital department that kind of like manages all of that. I also think I am not a big believer in big government. I think that when you have so many people involved, it becomes a mess. So I'm super happy to just be giving it, like, I will take care of it. I'll do the pitches. I'll write everything. Photos, everything. Like even from like the minute where we're taking pictures, like I always request, different pictures for all the DSPs. Like to me, that's like an integral part of my job. And I don't see it, to me, it's not publicity or not publicity. To me, it's an overall communication strategy for an artist that needs to be cohesive and holistic. I think that's super important.
That makes a lot of sense. Loren, what would you say, like looking back like 5 years ago, what other elements would you say are different now versus 5 years ago in terms of how the PR, industry and just like landscape has changed? What are the biggest things that you notice now?
So, I mean, so much has changed, but I think I'm only going to speak for my company. We're doing a lot more like content creation ideas, and we're definitely moving in that direction. We've been moving in that direction because TikTok is so vital to an artist's career. And a lot of the strategies that I see and marketing strategies that I see coming from the labels are like 80% focused on like digital content. I feel like there are very few artists who have a very clear understanding of their brand and how to really like create those narratives and push those narratives out via content. There are very few that do it really well. So I feel like there needs a lot of these artists need a lot of support. So a lot of our strategy, aside from like these are our media targets, if an artist, for instance, is really does really well in fashion, we're obviously gonna, work with fashion outlets, etc. That's the standard. But I think more than anything right now, we're like, okay, how do we come up with ideas for content that could create a viral moment, that then we can take that and, talk to press about that story? Because I feel, 5 years ago, I think, an artist's integrity as your artistic integrity, you release a song, it's a really good song. I feel like media was a lot more open to cover it. And now it's like, I have indie artists who are competing with the Bad Bunnies of the world and the Karol G's of the world. And so I'm just like, all right, well, you know, just because you're talented and you have this one good song with a great video doesn't mean that that's the only, that can't be the only tool for me to get you these opportunities. So we need to create moments. And I think my strategy has changed significantly because we focus on that, you know, a lot of the plans that I'm submitting, I'm like, these are our ideas for content, and maybe we could take this content and give it to this outlet. So it's much more content driven.
Mm. Yeah, it feels like a lot of artists, you know, especially with the pandemic, you know, they're like, the music's ready, I finished the song, I just want to release it, you know, and I always find myself having to, you know, slow the process down and trying to like hold it as much as possible to like really plan it out, create more content, also think about once the song is out for a while, like, how do you build it further? You know, what other things are available in terms of, you know, assets and the narrative as a whole. So yeah, I feel like that's super important. Looking around at everyone here, you know, I feel like there's obviously the priority for the most part is in the US market. But I think some of y'all, you know, also see the, you know, the global landscape, especially when it comes to media and opportunities, you know, whether, you know, a journalist in another country, you know, a media outlet, you know, especially when things are so digital and so globalized, you know, it could still impact, you know, in many places. So how often do you all find yourself working, you know, with media that aren't in the US or not necessarily tailored to the US market for your campaigns? You know, sometimes publicists are hired in different countries, but I feel like a lot of times, you know, it's a little bit of both, right? So
Yeah.
I think it all depends. I think it depends. Like there's times where like if I can handle something, I'll handle it. But I know that if I want something super specific and super targeted, then I do bring somebody in each country. Because it's the same thing as somebody who's, I don't know, in Argentina thinking that they can do US Hispanic or US stuff better than somebody who's local. I don't think it's a matter of like, you know, it's just stronger relationships because they're on a day-to-day with those people. But for like bigger stuff, you know, like I'm super, like I can handle that super well. But for very, very niche stuff, then I do like to bring somebody on locally in each market.
I mean, I think it's the narrative that we're carrying or that we're driving with you know, the storytelling and the marketing and PR strategies. Sometimes I mean, it has to remain aligned, and we've had to also working artists from other regions in this space has opened at least my agency up to getting to know a lot better certain territories, like for me, Mexico, and you know, in Spain. I mean, I used to have like one or two relationships, and now just because I work with so many artists that are, you know, from Spain and that region, it's happened that like I've just kind of, you know, again, networked and made these connects. So it depends, but if I need to go to Guatemala, I'm gonna have to hire out because I don't, like, those are not markets. But again, like the same music that's coming out here is people are hearing it in Japan, people are hearing it in Chile, people are hearing it in Spain. And you know, I mean, that doesn't change. So at the end of the day, whatever is happening, the digital world has really shifted the storytelling and the narrative, you know what I mean? Also the touring and all of that. I think it's just if I can get to know the market and network in the market and build those relationships, for me, it's a win-win.
With my experience, when I did promotion in each territories with big important artists, when we don't have like the global and digital thing, that's where you most of the time build a relationship with the media. And because of that, it's just like Romina is saying, you can work on those markets because you have sometimes, or this big artist that is a global artist, or you work with local artists like Argentina, Mexico, as Ximena says. If you don't know the market well, you have to go and try to contact somebody that is local.
Also, I want to say that, we're living in an era right now where you can find anybody's email from any media outlet, like from any country. It's really easy to get that. And so I tend to work artists who are very niche. Most of my roster are like bilingual kids who don't necessarily sing in Spanish. And so I've moved into other territories almost by default. I've evolved with my artists. So I'm like, all right, so they're doing really good in Mexico. This means that, this is my opportunity to grow here.
Exactly.
I have an artist who's like doing really good in Chile. So now I'm like expanding in that territory. I don't necessarily always hire out or hire someone on the ground, because if you're resourceful and just dedicate, the time and energy to get these contacts, if you have the artist that's like doing well in that territory, you don't even need to have the relationships. It'll happen naturally. Right. And that's happened to me in the last 5 years. I've been able to like have a presence in markets that I'm not a local in. So I feel for anybody who wants to do PR and wants to grow their business, before it was so difficult to get contacts. Before, if you don't have those emails, if you don't have those phone numbers, forget it. But now there are so
to call.
Decision days are over.
Yeah.
So
I remember having to call. Yeah.
Impact in a good way.
Yeah.
It was in a good way.
True.
It's easier now.
Totally. But I used to
look at Nanette and be like, I want to be like Nana, and I want to work all of Latin America. No,
remember when she was going back and forth between Argentina and the US? I remember I was like, 1 week Nana was in Buenos Aires, the next week she was here.
Her man. That's what we all have to do. Find hobbies.
But I still do that. I still go to Buenos Aires.
I don't leave my house ever. Every time I have to travel, I'm like,
I want to give Nanette her flowers though. Because Nanette, I feel like from all of us, was the first one, if not the first, one of the first publicists who worked US Latin and all of Latin America.
She was, yeah.
And she's been an inspiration. Nanette and I worked together for many years.
Of course.
Yeah. And she was always an inspiration to me because I saw
with digital. I remember that it was Loren, and it was like, you need to talk to Loren.
But yeah, so I feel like
thank you, Loren.
We thank you. You're welcome. The playing field is even now. It's like we all, if you have the right artist, like Romina was saying, she was a big part of Zetangana's success. And naturally, of course, now she could, move her artists into Spain because she has the connects. And, that's happened to me with Omar Apollo in Mexico. When I worked with Kali Uchis, she was huge in Mexico. So it opened up all those doors. So obviously, if you have a Bad Bunny on your roster, you could, the media is just going to swarm to you.
Yeah, it's all incoming.
Yeah, it's all incoming. So, I think it also depends on who you work. So I feel like what's key is like really like whatever territories your artist is strong in, there's such a great business opportunity.
You have to go and follow it.
To develop in that market and to be established. And then adding someone local is just, if you obviously have the funds and you could add someone to your team, awesome, so yeah.
But you know what's a good tool is to really connect and become really friendly with, if the press efforts in these territories are beginning with a tour, then like, get really friendly with the promoters of that tour, because they have the master.
It's through your network. You have to create.
Yeah, and then once you hit the ground, you just like talk to everybody that's you, and like it's just like how everything else. And the nature of our work is to, sell ice to the Eskimos. So we sell the ice to these journalists that are on site at these festivals or at these tours, and you make friends. At the end of the day, like this is how it is. And now with tools like WhatsApp, it's even really so much easier to communicate information to these guys that you don't necessarily talk to every day, but you keep the the relationship moving, you know, and connected, and then they help you out for other artists. So it just kind of like, it's just another like smart little tool that worked for me in certain territories as well.
That brings up a good point. Like, what would you all say now, you know, with communication with journalists? I feel like sometimes it's like a delicate balance, right? Because back in the day it was phone, then it became email, but then I feel like, you know, the majority of media, to reach them on email is a struggle, right? Or to get a response, even for media that you may work with forever, or even with a big artist. So how do you approach that, you know, in terms of communication to pitch? How do you find a way to do it professionally, but also persistent, right? And get, you know, answers and create, you know, opportunities.
Okay, so I'll jump in on this one. I love texting, right? So instead of sometimes really picking up the phone, because half of the people don't want to talk,
right?
Right? It's, oh, what's up? Like, hey girl, like, how are you? I got this. Let me know. And then boom, you send the email with all the assets, all the information, and lo and behold, you're on a roll. But I think the best communication is either text or what's up, at least for me, right? Like, I'm consistently like texting them, sending information, and I know they're seeing it because that little check mark turns blue. So it's like, okay, you saw it, cool. And if you're interested, you're gonna answer. If not, you know, you nudge sometimes and then you keep it moving. But for me, that's been the best approach.
Sometimes it's like that, and there's journalists that have been like super, you know, matter of fact, and just like, FYI, do not send me a press release or a pitch or reach out to me regarding an artist via WhatsApp, or like, you know, a phone call. Please send an email. So, you know, we all know those journalists, and, you know, we have to respect their wishes.
Yeah.
It's a balance, just like, you know, I really try on the weekends to put my out of office on my WhatsApp, and because I really try to, you know, give myself a little bit of balance as well. And a lot of the time media hits you up at 11:30 at night to say, hey, you know, like, can you send me this or whatever? And like, I don't want to answer. And even though I read it, I'm not going to answer, because it just opens up a can of worms. And I really honestly, truly despise WhatsApp. I wish it would have never been invented, because boundaries have been so crossed.
That's true.
And you know, also working with artists in Europe, it's like, you know, at 3 a.m.
Time.
Yeah, they're hitting me up and they're asking for stuff, and I'm an insomniac, so the second that my phone starts like buzzing or I see a little light, my eyes wake up, and then I end up handling. So but I mean, the unfortunate truth is also that via Instagram, via anywhere where there's a DM or a messaging a function, it's just kind of shifted. I just try not to like send press releases or anything via any of that. It goes through my regular blast and my personal pitches via email. But then, you know, if somebody needs something like a quick reference, and they ask me via WhatsApp, I just send them the link to the release and so forth and so on. But on my end, that's how I feel. It's just like everywhere now. There's no escaping it.
Well said. So a big part of the LAMC, you know, I feel is independent artists and up and coming artists, you know, that are trying to find their way and looking for advice and guidance, which can be so difficult and such a struggle. And, you know, obviously budget is a huge element there, right? In terms of, if you don't have a label that can pay for a publicist, or if you're, you know, have a really small label, the budget's really, you know, limited. So what would you say, like, to an artist that's, you know, unsigned and trying to figure out a way to, you know, develop a media following, you know, and a story with media, and get something flowing so that they can, you know, build their career further?
I can chime in on this. So I deal with this a lot. I get approached to get hired, and I say no a lot, you know, because I move with integrity, and I don't like to take someone's money when I feel like I'm going to be very limited, right? And so I always tell artists, don't hire a publicist until you can give us a story to sell. I'm not going to be able to get you all these press looks based on your talent and how good the song is. Those days are done. So until you create a moment for yourself or a series of moments where I can go back and say, not only is this person super talented, but look at their engagement. They have this cult following. Like, suddenly they're like opening up for this person. Like, there's more to the story. And so for me, again, I'm a big fan of moments because of our short attention span. I feel like, what happened 2 weeks ago, no one cares anymore. So I was like, give me moments, create those moments for yourself. You're not going to see a good return on your investment by hiring a PR and just getting you like to a few interviews. I feel like, of course we can do it because we have the leverage with our other artists. We have the relationships, but that's not the point. The point is about longevity. And the point is like doing something that's sustainable. Like, yes, I can get you press and I can get you stuff. I'm at a crossroads with a couple of projects who I've been working with for a couple of years, and nothing major has happened. There hasn't been a shift and they're sort of stuck. And so, artists tend to be a little bit delusional, no disrespect, but they're just like, why am I not getting these other big looks? And I'm just like, you're not on tour. You're not in the festival circuit. You haven't had a viral moment. You don't, even 2 years, 3 years, you don't have a song on Billboard. You don't have major features with anybody. So I already sold your story. I I don't have a new story to tell. Everyone's like, yeah, okay. Pero ¿y qué? So, and not to sound like a jerk, but it's just like, don't invest in us until you give us all the tools. And by tools, I mean the narratives and all of that substance, that those moments, like, and then we can go to the press, and then you'll have a better return on your investment that will be sustainable. So
I also just like really quick to give space to everyone to talk about this, because I know obviously everyone has some kind of feedback on this because it's happened to all of us, right? I also like I've had artists that approach us and they're amazing and talented and they have this whole rollout for the one single and they have budget, but then what happens once that dies down? Like, this isn't, an artist in development, it isn't a 3 or 4 month assignment for any PR team that you hire. You know me? Like, it takes time. An artist in development needs for sure like a 1 year commitment. And what is the backup? You have this one song, and so what's next? Like, what do we have rolling out? And a lot of the times what I say to them is like, save your money to invest in your digital marketing campaigns or whatever it's going to be for your second single. Because honestly, like, I'm happy to write you a press release. I mean, I don't do this anymore, but sometimes I'd be like, let me send a press release out on your behalf and, try to help you that way. And if, again, there's interest from media or somebody, like, I'm happy to make these things happen. But I just really think that you need to be in a certain stage, like Loren says, and not like, also because a lot of artists beginning don't really have a true understanding on what a publicist is. So on their PR, they think it's like all of it. And it's not all of it. You know what I'm saying? There's like there's different parts to the engine for the truck to move, and you cannot like spend all your money on the steering wheel when you don't have freaking tires in the truck. You get me? Like, it doesn't work like that. So it's also educating them and sitting down and just saying, look, dude, come see me when things are like happening, when maybe you have an investors, when you have interest from a label. I'm happy to help you. And I know Ximena also has had artists that like have like been in those stages of being unsigned, but like there's something happening and she's been able to help them like reach another point. And it's like at that stage of when an artist that is beginning happens is like okay to take something on, but really I'm also not in the business of taking people's money just because I don't need the money. And also, like, who wants to be Like, I don't want that karma. Like, use the money where it will help you expand your music and have your music reach potential fans. Bottom line, it's not going to be through press.
Well said. So let's see. What I'm trying to think of, we've covered a lot. In the age of short attention spans, like you guys have talked about this a lot, but people, they change so quickly what they're paying attention to, especially in media. Like something's hot and then it's not, or a new song is relevant for 1 week and then the next week it's not relevant. I mean, that's one of the most frustrating things ever, right? It's like when you release a big new song and you need to be patient, as you all said. Like you need time, you need months, if not years, to develop a story. So what would you say, is your way to combat that? Like how are you looking at ways to, expand the life of a project and keep a song relevant, for longer than that 1 week span?
Okay, I'm going to chime in real quick on this one, right? So it would be by spacing it out. If you have basically, right, how I align things, it depends on what we're doing, right? Are we releasing a single? Are we releasing an album? Or are we releasing an EP? And how are we leading up to each release and thereafter that release, right? So if it's a single, you kind of space it out with, okay, so the single came out and everything blows up, New Music Friday and placements and playlists and everything, visualizers, content, and how you continue to promote it on your socials, on TikTok, on your reels, on Facebook. How you continue to push that narrative is what keeps that alive, right? A lot of the things I like to do also on the PR side is I like to do like a whole bunch of interviews, but embargo them and release them little by little. So then you have consistent press coming out on it. And it doesn't look like everything came out on that one day, right? Again, it's all about strategy. I mean, these girls here on this panel are just amazing. And I think that we're all very like-minded. So everyone, pretty much said a lot of the things that I think we have in our brains or how we work, right? So for me, like a lot of things when it comes to that is all strategy, from the moment you take on what it is and how you move on till the end. So, I like to divide it by project. Is it single? Is it album? Or like, what are we working on? And then just kind of go from there. But you piece things out to keep that longevity going. And that way it doesn't get lost in the mix.
Totally. What would you say? Does anybody have an example or like a case study where you're like, this song was out for 4 months, 6 months, and it took a long time, but it finally hit, and like where patience paid off and where you feel like you guys like stuck with it? Just an interesting story, like if you have an anecdote so people can learn about kind of what has helped, in those long-term type of stories. Anything come to mind?
It was interesting when I started working with Nathanael, I remember, it's funny because I've always worked with the underdogs. Like when I was at Machete, like nobody wanted Don Omar, nobody wanted Wisin y Yandel, nobody wanted any of these people. I literally, que en paz descanse, Alejandra Isabel, like I remember, like I had to sit down with her and explain to her who Don Omar was, who Wisin y Yandel was, because back in those days, I mean, Loren, you remember, Nanette, remember, like,
yeah,
those days, you didn't have Univision, you didn't exist, and like, Don Omar didn't perform a couple of premios Lo Nuestro, so he was banned from Univision. So it's like you couldn't get anywhere if you weren't. I forgot what your question was because I started talking about this. Oh, yeah. So the underdogs. So what happens is, yeah, like with Nata, like nobody, like I'm telling you, I don't think I had worked with an artist as hard as I did with Nata because his numbers were huge and his numbers just grew and grew and grew. But at that time, regional Mexican wasn't as cool as it is and hip as it is right now. And then, we did that collab with Bad Bunny that kind of like shifted everything. And then people that normally weren't interested in somebody like him, all of a sudden started paying attention to him. And what was very, very important when we did that was to make sure that Bunny did a corrido and not the other way around, because that would have been really easy for Nata to just go do, you know, an urban song, and that wasn't the point. So that's when everybody kind of like discovered Nata, and it's like, no, motherfuckers, he's been around for like 8 months, and I've been telling you about it for like 8 freaking months. Like now all of a sudden you found, oh, we discovered Nata. And I've had a lot of instances like that, you know, and I think that also comes down to how much you believe in your artist. You know, when you take on clients just to take on clients, just because you want to take on clients, and you're not really connected to them, and there's no passion for their music and understanding really where they're coming from and where they're from and where they're going and how you can help in there. Like you can tell a lot in the outcomes on the outcome of what you do with an artist based on your connection to that artist. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm the, you know, when I started working regional Mexican, like nobody was doing regional Mexican from like the urban side. So it was like, I feel like I'm doing the machete thing all over again, and like begging people to help me, like, you know, to try to get Nata on Rolling Stone. I remember the first time it was like, you know, it was a lot of work, and then eventually it kind of became just like, you know, he became a household name, obviously thanks to the Benito thing, which was interesting. The song never really blew up for him anyway. It just kind of gave him like people saw him in a different light, but the song really never blew up. And then, you know, people discovered his songs that were older than that were big. So yeah, I just think you have to be passionate and love the artist and what they're doing and really get behind it. And I think people will eventually catch on.
Yeah, Paul. So I have a case study to answer your question directly. And this is a really big artist. But again, you know, Anitta was a Brazilian superstar, insane numbers and popularity in Brazil. And then because she was like she's like the Beyonce of Brazil, right? She has all these relationships with all these like other artists and Diplo, and so she basically, artists from any country, like the top artists, they know her because they come into the market and they work with her in the market to break into the Brazilian space, and you know, yada yada. She became a social media phenomenon, right? But when she wanted to come over into this space, and was signed with you know, US based labels, the strategy was like, you know, collabs to be able to get her to get a #1. And although she collaborated with many big stars in both markets, nothing really broke for her until we sat one day and we discussed, or you know, she wanted our input in whether she should release this song in Volver by herself. And my comment to her was, hey dude, you have not put out a song by yourself, and so like you need the credibility that you can sustain a solo release, right? Like it's fine, everybody loves you, but everybody loves the social phenomenon in this country and in Mexico and all these territories. So how are we? You need to give yourself the credibility. Back and forth. We were waiting for a collab, and then, you know, and then again, she insisted, she pushed, and finally, you know, the label was like, okay, let's do it. Let's just release the song solo. The song was released, and it did fine. It performed just like the other ones. And then 6 months later, you know, because we wanted to do something fun with the song, and she's really good friends with Justin Quiles, and he was like, let me jump on this remix. So I did the remix, and then they did this thing that she wanted to do on TikTok. She was like, I want to do a TikTok, and it completely changed her career, the direction of her song, you know, her breaking all kinds of records. And it was one of those things where like, we said, okay, you know, the song ran its course. You want to do a remix? Cool. Like it sounded dope. And we thought, but again, it's one of those things where we released the song and we did all we could do. Again, the song didn't tank either, but it wasn't like anything like after she did that TikTok. she did the TikTok, and this thing just like went global, like in 2 weeks. It was insanity. I've never seen anything like it. And it really put her on the map globally, where, you know, as an artist and not like a social media phenom, because not only did the song go global virally on TikTok, but then on Spotify, she became the #1 artist. She's the 3rd female artist to, you know, and she really put her country on the map the way that she always wanted to, was to be a Brazilian artist in top these charts. So, you know, it's that to me was one of those things where, you know, we really think the song had ran its course, and then there she went.
A whole new life.
On the floor.
Yeah. I love that story. Thanks so much. Unfortunately, our time is up, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you all for joining. It was fun.
Yay, it's good to see you
Hope
guys.
to see you all in person. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Paul.